How's it going, everybody? Today I want to take a deep look into why you should never try to convince, persuade, or present evidence to normies, NPCs, or blue pill people, however you want to put it. And there's several levels of moral consciousness that people operate from, and understanding other people's level is very important, as well as political theory. And in today's video, I want to apply a little bit of both to understanding these political dynamics, because you're going to encounter them in your daily life. And there's two mindsets that explain a big part of modern political conflict, and together they constitute the majority of people in the West. We'll call them blue and orange, to put it briefly. Super simple. Blue is level 4, and it's the rule following mindset, and orange is level 5, and it's the reason based mindset. This distinction shapes a huge amount of political interactions, okay? And there's 8 levels. You can watch my video to get a deeper look. And most people operate between level 3 and 6, with the plurality of people being level 4, and most political dissidents. And if you're watching this video, you're probably at level 5 right here. So blue is the mindset that follows rigid rules, right? They conform to authority. They have absolute beliefs about how the world works. Things are seen unambiguously as right or wrong, legitimate or illegitimate, true or false. And the system itself, its beliefs, institutions, and authorities are preemptively assumed to be valid. And orange forms opinions through logic, evidence, empirical observation, noticing patterns. Instead of accepting authority, orange asks, does this actually make sense? So let's apply these two political views to better help us understand political interactions in politics. Blue people are just your normies. We call them blue pill people. They generally believe in the official narratives of society, the media, news, teachers, and experts. And they're generally concerned with doing things the right way in order to fit in and not rock the boat too much. And stage 5 orange is different because they tend to be critical thinkers, right? You might call them free thinkers, or at least relative to blue they are. And many political dissidents fall into this category, but this creates an interesting dynamic because there's something very interesting and mysterious about politics, and you've definitely encountered this. And the way it works is, let's say you start thinking about politics logically, right? You notice patterns. You stop believing the official narratives at face value, the idea that democracy is simply the rule of the people, that citizens vote, that there's a free press that holds people accountable, that experts don't have ulterior motives and they know best, so you should believe in them, that voting directly determines or highly influences political outcomes, and that politicians are ultimately constrained by the will of voters. But then you look a little bit closer, or even better, you study elite theory. You study how power actually operates, and suddenly politics looks very different, right? You start to notice something. You start to notice that campaigns need funding. Someone finances those campaigns to push what agenda, to pass a certain policy, to benefit certain interest groups. And is any of this surprising? Well, of course not, right? It's just how politics actually works. It's very simple, right? But when you see this, your views start to change. You see coordination behind events. You start seeing alliances. You start seeing power networks. In other words, you start noticing conspiracies. Politics has always involved conspiracies. It's just the foundation of politics, and that's normal. People coordinate privately to influence power. What happens when you start thinking like this out loud? A lot of people are going to get angry, and they're going to accuse you of being what? A conspiracy theorist. As if that in any way, shape, or form discredits your argument. I mean, why does this reaction happen? It's kind of strange, right? It's kind of mysterious, right? And that's because most people are operating from stage 4 blue. Okay, so blue people, blue thinking relies on official legitimacy. The system has to be seen as legitimate. Otherwise, society feels unstable, right? Blue just defends the official narrative. This is just democracy. This is how the system works. This is how decisions are made. Experts know better, and they're just beliefs that help maintain social order, but they also make criticism and accountability very difficult. So when they find something outside the official narrative, they just respond like this, right? Well, that's a conspiracy theory. They use the label as an insult. But notice something, they're not analyzing the claim itself. They're just engaging in an ad hominem, and they're reacting to the fact that the idea sits outside the accepted narrative. So when you encounter this, it can be shocking, right? You can ask something like, well, I mean, do you believe in corruption? Or if the person is left-wing, well, do you think capitalism corrupts? If the answer is yes, and they would happen to be right about that, well, then that person also quite literally believes in conspiracies. Those are conspiracy theories, but they don't think about it. They don't think about the logical cohesion of what they're thinking or saying, right? So you might think, well, how can someone dismiss an argument like that? You might think, well, the person is stupid, and call it a day. The person is just stupid. Done. And that's going to be your first reaction, and that can get you so far. Because, and actually, there's usually a correlation, causally, right? Lower cognitive ability does correlate with more concrete thinking, right? Such as that of, people who have these concrete beliefs, like the ones I just laid out. But that explanation only goes so far, because eventually you're going to meet people who are clearly, relatively intelligent, who are capable of logic, abstract, or perhaps systemic thinking, and someone who functions well in other areas of life, and yet they'll still think in this very rigid way, okay? So at that point, these people are just stupid is no longer a sufficient explanation, right? Why would someone capable of advanced reasoning, the answer has less to do with intelligence and more with psychological stability? Because rigid thinking like this provides structure, provides certainty. They make the world easy to understand and navigate. Ambiguity about right and wrong disappears, and everything fits neatly into a clear, simple framework. And that framework is usually tied to social legitimacy and belonging. Blue thinking provides a sense of meaning, a feeling that a person is doing the right thing by following the rules, doing what they think responsible people are supposed to do or believe, or what they're supposed to be believing, right? And they struggle to distinguish between contributing to society and supporting and contributing to the elites in charge of the institutions that benefit from society. So it's all about being a good citizen, a responsible member of the team, and this can work well. I mean, but what happens when that would be the case if institutions were healthy, right? But what happens when they aren't, right? When institutions are corrupt? Well, this type of thinking reinforces the problem, right? But from a blue perspective, that possibility is difficult to consider. So challenging the system can seem antisocial, reckless, dangerous, even if your goal is positive reform. Blue is capable of dissent, but they're usually conforming to different authorities, and they're encouraged by that different authority or that different society to antagonize a different society. But their mindset is fundamentally conformist, right? You might encounter this in different ways. A religious fundamentalist is going to conform to a religious community. A progressive is going to conform to their acquaintances and university professors. They'll conform to whatever the media. But most people are just conforming to a certain political party and the medias that back up the views that help that party, and that's just how they conform. Okay, so what happens when you want to take a deeper look about how the world works? You read books, you examine incentives, you study elite theory, you subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so that you don't miss any notifications. You analyze patterns, you try to understand how power actually works, and then you have great revelations about how the world. You're eager to come out and try to explain what you just found and share the good news and facts to everybody. But instead, people dismiss it. You got that from YouTube. That's not a reliable source of news. That's not what the experts say. You're not a doctor. You're not a psychologist. You're not a real psychologist, right? Because you don't have a degree. You're not an authority. And the pattern is this, that there's no argument about the content. It's about the source. It's about whether it's accepted or not, whether it's officially sanctioned, right? no regard whatsoever from whether the authority is coming from good faith or is being paid to push a certain narrative, or they might think, how can everybody else who doesn't believe that be wrong, right? You encounter this repeatedly. It can be very frustrating and very tiresome. You present evidence, you try to reason carefully, and the response is just a label. You're just a conspiracy theorist, right? That's internet misinformation. That's not a reliable source. And at that point, again, you just assume, well, the person is stupid, and that's fine. But the deeper explanation is developmental, because different levels operate under different rules of reasoning. From the blue perspective, orange can look dangerous, chaotic, and it usually is, right? It's too much work to be thinking about what's really happening, about my beliefs, are they coherent or not. So from orange, blue is just, it seems naive, seems stupid, seems rigid, seems intellectually lazy, seems perhaps weak and sheepish, right? So both sides see each other as irrational, and the clash just becomes inevitable, right? But here's what I want you to understand. There's usually a hidden assumption that people at stage 5 orange make, and you probably make this assumption without realizing it, and it's the idea that you think that other people care about the same things you do. That's the implication, right? You care about logic, you care about evidence, you care about noticing patterns, you care about objective truth, you care about understanding incentives and structures. So you come forward, present arguments and evidence, and you think people will just look at it and think, oh wow, that's interesting, I never thought about that. But most people are not orange. They don't care about that. They don't care about any of the things you care about. Blue just wants to conform to authority and to fit in. That's what they care about. That's what they're thinking about. How do I maximize this, right? They're not interested in logic, right? So when you're arguing with someone with a logic system that the person is not using, that's the hidden assumption that emerges, right? That you make, right? And this is key to move on to the next levels, and is to understand that most people do not care about evidence, logic, reasoning, data, and so on, right? That's what's happening, right? People just don't care about that. They're not thinking about that, right? So when you understand this, political arguments make more sense. You're not debating facts. You're speaking across different developmental frameworks. It's almost like different languages, right? But Blue's not going to change its mind because of your argument. Blue can change its mind, but only when the authority changes its position and exerts social pressure and makes it safe for its community to adopt that position. That's what happens. So if institutions shift, Blue can reconsider their position. If institutions do not change, Blue will remain stuck, right? So that's very important to realize. So the problem isn't Blue people, right? Because rigid thinking, now today rigid thinking can struggle very much in rapidly changing environments, but in other eras of history, that wasn't really a problem, right? If you live in the Middle Ages, right, you live in a society that barely changes for generations, right? You have religion, and it provides a stable worldview. You follow the teachings of the Bible or the Quran. You accept those teachings literally. You organize your life around them, and in that environment, that approach works. You build a family, you participate in your community, relate to others according to the principles of your holy texts and the authority responsible for interpreting them, your priest, your imam, whatever. You live a stable life. And these beliefs, even if you think they're not literally true, Catholicism and Islam in particular, they're tested by time to be capable of creating cohesive communities, stable families, a relatively moral society. And rigid identity can help you navigate that world. You can be fine because the world itself is stable, but we don't live there anymore at all. Change today is constant. Technology reshapes society every decade. New systems emerge, old systems collapse. The rigid frameworks just struggle to keep up, and that's going to push people towards orange, but perhaps in a more unhealthy way. So you must realize this, however, especially if you're interested in politics and understanding what's really happening. Being political theory aware and literate will help you with this, right? And the problem is society structure. More specifically, the structure of power, because societies do not define themselves. They are shaped by elites, political elites, economic elites, institutional elites, academic elites. These groups influence the direction of the system. So if you have an integral perspective, the strategy and what you have to do, it becomes a lot more clear, right? Antagonizing blue is going to lead nowhere. Blue will just follow the system it is given, right? So what we have to do is improve the system itself. How? By influencing the people who shape it, by encouraging developmentally aware elites, people capable of more complex thinking, seeing broader patterns. If elites become more aware, the system changes, and blue is just going to adapt. Blue is just going to follow the new rule. So the problem isn't blue, so stop antagonizing them. Number one, they don't get it. Number two, there's no point in trying to get them in the first place, right? Blue can support a healthy society as long as the rules make sense. And that's something we can only achieve by supporting each other in becoming influential, right? But so, our goal is not to change or persuade normies. Our goal is to change the rules, right? Blue will follow. If you're trying to persuade normies, in part is because you don't understand their developmental limitations, but the other reason is the nature of political organization. In your heart of hearts, deep down, you still believe in democracy. You believe that human organization is bottom up. You believe in anarchy, perhaps. You have the implication that people have opinions, and somehow that's going to reflect and trickle up into elites and onto the broader population, and that's not how it works. It's the other way around. Elites define institutions, and those institutions exert pressure to shape people's minds. And actually that's possible because the plurality of people are staged for blue. So that's interesting. What do you think about that? Like, what would happen if the plurality of people became orange? Would that break the paradigm of elite organization? Would that change the paradigm of elite theory as we understand it? Would society become more accountable but less stable? That's interesting. So give me your thoughts in the comments below.